This is Duke University.
Think about this. There's a book, I think it's a very important book called Women Don't Ask. And in that book, Linda Babcock basically documenting the fact that women don't negotiate for salary, for example, in the same way that men do. So men could come to the boss and say, I don't think I'm getting paid enough, I want a 10% raise. And maybe they don't get 10%, but maybe they get some raise. And what she's showing is that women don't do it to a large degree. And the question is, why don't women do it? And she looks at it, and she says that women don't do it because it will make them lose some of their perception of feminism, of being feminine. Sorry, not feminism, looking less feminine. So what women are doing, they're saying, I don't want to be judged harshly by my fellow women workers. If I start negotiating for salary, my fellow women workers will think that I'm aggressive, masculine, and they would not like me as much. And you know, by the way, they're correct. When they do argue for salary, the other women in their group think of them as not as helpful, not as pleasant, and so on, just because they want a higher salary. So here we have a kind of a terrible kind of cycle in which women want to keep a particular reputation in terms of, in the eyes of their fellow workers, and because of that, they don't ask for a raise, and they want to keep that thing, and then basically women cause it for themselves because of the social norms that have been created around that. And that cycle makes it very tough for women to basically go to somebody and say, I want a raise, I want to move out to a new job, and so on. And there's lots of nuances like that we don't think about as the big issues, the glass ceiling, and so on. Small social norms and small kind of cycles that actually make changes very, very tough. Muriel has these set of papers together with Uri Gnisi and Aldo Rotecini and some others that look at, in one paper they look at Stanford computer science undergrads. Right? If you thought about women that compete, that's a good group to think about women who would compete in general, right? High achiever, computer science, and so on. And they gave them some math exercises until they knew how good they are in these particular math things. And then they said, why don't you choose? You could get paid in one of two ways. You could either get paid based on your performance alone, right? Like pay per unit. Every question you solve, you get X cents. Or you could enter a tournament. What does it mean, enter a tournament? You will enter a tournament with other people, which will be a mixed gender, some men, some women. And if you win, you'll get a ton of money. But if you don't win, you get nothing. So now think about this question. Under what conditions should you get paid by your own performance, and under what conditions should you enter a tournament? Well, you should enter a tournament when you think you have a chance to being the best. So imagine we took people, men and women, and we divide them into the worst quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, and the fourth quarter. What you would want to see is that the people in the lowest quarter don't participate in the tournament. They get paid by their own performance. Not much, but it's better than nothing. And then as they become better, they join the competition more. That's what you would expect if people understood their performance and understood what competition does. What actually happened was that men overly compete. The good men enter the competition, but also the bad men. Bad, I mean not evil, but not good in math. Basically, the participation rate for men in competition were way too high, which suggests that even the men who couldn't do math very well basically enjoyed the competition and they lost money because of it. And women did not enter the competition enough. Even the good women, the women who were not that good shouldn't have entered the competition and didn't, but the women who were really good in math did not enter the competition enough. So what this tells us is that there's another preference here, which is the preference for competition. And you can ask yourself, how much do you enjoy competition? Do you enjoy it a lot? Don't enjoy it as much. Do you like competitive sport? Don't enjoy it as much. Being a CEO in the US is a competitive sport. Probably it's a competitive sport worse than, I don't know, what's the most violent kind of game? Probably like water polo, right? Because you can kick under the water and nobody sees, and there's lots of elbowing and so on. Corporate America is probably closer to water polo than to any other any other sports in terms of elbowing and so on. Do you enjoy this game? Maybe there's a gender gap there as well. By the way, all of this is just to say that we're dealing with a very complex situation. Men and women are different in all kinds of things. We're different in our biology, we're different in our time clock, we're different in our preferences. Not everybody, but there's general differences, and we need to think about the global picture and not just about one simple solution and how we optimize for, I don't know, equality in the boardroom, or something that simple.
There's a lot of pressure put on men to provide for their families, and I think it does cause problems for both men and for women, because that often pushes men into feeling that they have to work 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, which then means that their wives have to pick up the slack with the family and therefore can't often, or it's very difficult to take on jobs that would also require them to take on 50, 60, 70-hour-a-week. So it tends to push people into a kind of imbalance where if men didn't feel that pressure to provide in that kind of way and didn't feel that their masculinity would be under attack if part of what they were doing was caring for the children and participating in family life in that way, we might be able to even out those ways men and women balance.
Never until the last 100 years did you, unless you were, well, even then, I was going to say unless you were the monarch, did you ever have a job, a world where you were just taking care of children? In pre-industrial times, you were farming, you were running your shop, you were doing a million other things to support your family, and you were also raising children. This whole idea of having it all is extremely historical and extremely geographic, and it's very much a product of a certain kind of socioeconomic system. I also think the definition of all is really odd, because it's not talking about necessarily emotional sustenance, but it's really talking about the amount of time you are or aren't spending with your children. After a certain age, most kids really don't want you to spend 24/7 with them. And I think teaching in a place like Duke, I've seen the opposite of the kind of helicopter parents that have given their, especially mothers, that have put all their attention on their children. And I'm not sure that's a healthy thing for anybody, especially for the children. So I think in that debate, part of what I would say is that I want to ask what it means to have it all. I think there's lots and lots of different ways of having it all.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.